Welcome to Revive Ministry Podcast. Today, we'll be returning to a segment I used to do in the very beginning of my podcast. It's called Robert's Corner. I thought about doing this as trying to build more dynamic. I know sometimes guests are hard to schedule. Um, that that fits, obviously the week to week, but at the same time, it's I don't want to strain to kind of um, to make something. And I thought to myself, last few weeks, and I'll actually enter into 2025, what ways I can actually address this. And I thought, um, there's different ways and more informal ways I did in the past, and Robert's Corners what was one of that. And to explain for those who haven't listened to me before, Robert's Corner just has more an informal and it's a shorter dialogue. It's usually just me. I don't think I ever had a guest on Robert's Corner, but I may shed light or continue the conversation of this month's theme, which is, this month's theme is our connections. But at the same time, it doesn't really. It's more unscripted. It's more of me just sharing my insight. I might expand on that, just like I'm trying to figure out how to expand with the music portion. But then again, I just feel there's different ways we creatively, or even just how we feel comfortably about sharing or just being a part of the dialogue. So I do appreciate all my guests, those who are listening. But yeah, here we go. It's Robert's Corner. I don't know how often this will be. It may come sporadically. Maybe I'll include it to the monthly thing, or a variation of both. So again, I want to start off before beginning, is to recognize that World Cancer Day already has passed, but just want to shed a few lights. I'm going to be doing this not only here today, but also in other episodes of this month's theme. But just want to shed light on the new World Cancer theme is United by Unique. Um, Places people at the center of the care and their stories at the heart of the conversation. Um, some statistics of note is annual death is 10 million people die from cancer every year. That's more than HIV, AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis combined. Another statistic that I got from the site regarding this World Cancer Day is that about 70% of cancer deaths occur in low to middle income countries. The World Cancer Day was initiated of the Union of International Cancer Control, UICC, and to kind of, I guess, simplify what their goal is to support cancer communities in its effort to reduce the global cancer burden, promote greater equity, and ensure that cancer control remains a priority on the global health and development. I guess I didn't around the world, and I think it's a lofty but inspiring goal. A lot of us may know someone or has a family member or experienced cancer themselves, and I do feel when we think about health, we don't just look about mental health, we look at the physical, but the all around health. So when there's days or awareness days, I try to remind or try to shed light on that. So a disclaimer as we begin: if you're in crisis, please seek appropriate professional help immediately. The 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline is available for those in the States. As you know, when this episode comes out, it'll be the day before Valentine's Day. So a lot of people might be panicking, trying to find ways to make that day extra special. But it also could be a severe contrast for those who may be feeling left out, or maybe have lost someone or a relationship or the person themselves. I just want to shed light on the actual day. There's several different stories. So um, Whether if this is correct or not, I apologize. But this is one of the stories regarding Valentine's. Saint Valentine was a priest who served during the third century of Rome. In Rome, I mean, when Emperor Claudius II decided that single men made better soldiers those with than those with wives and families. So he outlawed marriage for young men. Valentine realized this injustice of the decree, defied Claudius, and continued to perform marriages for young lovers in secret. Claudius ordered that he be put to death, and I guess to sum it up, Valentine was suggested to have been beheaded by Claudius outside of Rome. Obviously, there's, like I said, there's many different. It's a little murky of what the actual history, what actually happened, but that is one interpretation I've read. So, in that regard, now we're in 2025. Without the denial of being outlawed to be married as Claudius II, in that context, we appear to be less connected, a lonely society. I'm not saying this for all of us, but I do find personally it is harder to connect. It's, we could communicate, I could tell what I want, but connection sometimes becomes harder. And a lot of times, like I said, when guests are here, I'm going to say when I'm by myself, people have said it better than I have. Sean Stevenson says, communication is merely the exchange of information, and connection is the exchange of our humanity. I think there's a lot of context that gets, I guess, filtered out when we communicate. And I kind of, I remember, at least in regards to the status quo, or I guess when I was learning a job and I got fairly good at it, and I hit a milestone. I remember my supervisor told me, Robert, don't stop, just keep going, and just keep going. No matter if you reach your marker, even though you're exceeding expectations, to keep moving forward. And I feel like, even though it's so simple, that advice kind of stays with me today. So and not to say I figured it out, but I think that builds sometimes a more positive approach to habits or things that may be uncomfortable for us. So one of the things that may be uncomfortable for us is connecting, So I try to, at least personally, to reflect on why this thing bothered me. The person matters to me, and it may even increase the urgency. If it's a close friend, a colleague, spouse, why was I so upset? At least, I'm not saying this is fundamentally going to be helpful for you, but for me, I guess being hungry and curious about why things affected me or impacted me. And I think it started, obviously, when for the years that I have been struggling with mental health issues before, I am now and still am continually trying to navigate as someone who suffers. And it's one thing, a lot of times when we think about mental health, and I think a guest previously said this, and I think it's well said, when we think about mental health, we're really talking about mental illness, not really mental health. And I feel like there's a big contrast. Is it mental maintain, or is it actually building to something? So from my experience, the idea of the norm can help. The normal can help with so much, but at the end of the day, if you're not happy, if you're not really where you feel you need to be, Instead of uh, quote unquote statements, I would ask myself why. And I think the curiosity has helped my communication. It's not ever where it could be, but like anything else, we all change in time. I think Woody Allen says kind of you could take it in very many different ways, but so life is full of misery, loneliness, and suffering, and it's all over much too soon. It's almost like an extreme way of acceptance, but understanding that um, there is definitely some with the good. Well, with the bad, there is also good. There's a desire to live. I'm not saying at anyone's lowest moment, but in regards to loneliness as we look in this holiday, if you used to be connected or you're suffering from a major medical issue, illness, or issue, or a mental health one, or both, and um, the contrast of where you were and where you are now is so loud. So Valentine's Day, as it's meant to be, well, one would argue it's very consumerized, but in the essence of connecting with your significant other becomes more of a daunting contrast of what you lost. Um, I think Jodie Picot says it this way. She said, if you meet a loner, no matter what they tell you, it's not because they enjoy solitude. It's because they have tried to blend into the world before and people continue to disappoint them. I think there's wisdom in that. A lot of times, it's at least I find being alone can be helpful and comforting. Um, when I have, and I think the most important thing, at least in my experience, is when I'm alone, I'm comfortable who I am. Not to say I like every aspect. I accept certain realities, but if if I don't like who I am, or I avoid anything that's discomforting, being alone can be daunting. And at least for me, um, this holiday or any holiday that promotes or kind of sheds light on what you may have lost, or so just a contrast of just feeling left out. You could be around people and still feel left out. So it's not the proximity, as it's more how you view yourself. At least from my experience, those who listen, those who experience it differently, it's not about defining it universally, but I guess for me it's about expressing how it was, how I experienced it. And I thought it was appropriate, as like I said, Robert's Corner is less less it's more impromptu. It's more about just me having a conversation about thoughts I had about this topic, thoughts I had about loneliness, thoughts of my experiences, and how they shed and kind of helped me through. And if it helps you, great. If it doesn't, well, find something that does. Whatever that looks like. Hunter S. Thompson says, I don't see how you can respect yourself. You must look in the hearts and minds of others for your happiness. I can say from my experience that this um, can be overwhelmingly discouraging. um, if I'm changing, my mood changes. I have no chance to understand any other person's mood or changes. I remember just one comedian I thought was kind of funny. I become the mayor of nothing. John Mulaney said that, and I find that interesting. But I think a lot of us do it. We are so. And I think there's this kind of certainty that if I am like so much, that things will improve. But you still are mostly, well, all the time with yourself. So if you're not happy with yourself, No matter if people like you, at least from my experience, it won't matter. People a lot of times told me, "You're really smart. You're whatever XYZ." If I don't believe it, it doesn't really, especially when I was really struggling, it didn't really matter. Like it almost felt. Um, Sometimes it can even feel patronizing, or it could just feel hurtful because I just feel like that's not me. Why are you lying to me? And granted, um, hindsight 2020, but I just it's still I would say it still lingers today. I prefer someone to help me versus positive positively affirm me, because especially if I don't know you, the trust kind of dwindles, and I usually um, doesn't usually ring positively. I try to always reflect and check myself so it doesn't become like a static thing that I feel that I am. I have the latitude to always feel that way, or just to feel that that is just who I am. Because I think who I am changes, just like everything else changes. Mother Teresa says, "The most terrible poverty and is loneliness and the feeling of being unloved." I think all of us, and it's funny that I'm talking about loneliness right next to the day before Valentine's Day, but I think most of us will understand it. As consumerized as it can be, it can very much share, just like the holidays, what you have lost or what you don't have. Andy Rooney, like I said, Andy Rooney said it this way, and I'm just going through all these. I was reading through some quotes. I was thinking about what I was going to share, and I like what he says. If you smile when you're alone, then you really mean it. I think there's a lot of wisdom to that. Andy Rooney from 60 Minutes. I feel if you can smile when you don't have, when you're alone, it feels more genuine, especially given the at least in my mind, thinking, filling in the gaps with my context and my. I think Andy Rooney was really onto something there. I remember reading, you know, um, Huckleberry Finn, Mark Twain. Mark Twain says it this way: "The worst loneliness is not to be comfortable with yourself." And I think I wholeheartedly agree with that. Just from my experience, I feel what has been tremendously helpful is to um, not like to not blindly love myself. I know there's certain areas that I would like to improve, but more just go through the reflection, understand context, barriers, but also be kinder to myself versus just avoidant or bitter. I could look at the same painting and look at it so negatively, or I could look at the same painting and just look at all I have learned. And part of on top of that, well, next to that, just the idea of being more comfortable with yourself, having self-respect, and self-respect also includes how we use our time. Um, Gil, Guillermo Maldonado. I'm sorry if I. He said, "Loneliness is not lack of company. Loneliness is lack of purpose," and I agree with that too. I think, um, part in tandem of being comfortable with myself is also being comfortable and find a hobby, find something that I can be creative, connect, when there's less steps to get to that. So if I wanted to ride a bike and I don't have a bike, it's gonna be kind of difficult, So, or maybe so I tend to try to find something that has less steps, especially if I'm not feeling as well when it comes to getting to finding purpose. And I feel it, the more time you put in it, at least from my experience, it becomes more yours. And I find that very helpful. And the idea of accountability um, not being a bad word when you're in a safe place. Now, we know safe places physically, but are you a safe place in your mind? Do you have constant negative talk inside? And challenge those talks, and at the same time, I found that hobbies has been really helpful. I like music, I like gaming, I like several different modalities. I like connecting. I understand where I have barriers. I understand where I would like to improve. Um, but I also know that I am also human, and I accept that. And it's not that I relinquish my accountability. I know that not everything can be happened in one sitting. I can't go to Costco and get everything solved. A lot of times it may be even half a problem just started. And that may be frustrating, but I try to remind myself to be kinder to myself. Remember my context. It may be helpful for you. Another thing is sometimes um, we try to be strong. This was an unknown. I really appreciate what um, is said. It says sometimes it's the person who tries to be the strongest that ends up feeling the loneliest. Loneliness. I've seen that in family and friends. I've seen that in myself. Um, it's it's frustrating when you feel you're one holding all the weight, um and in my context, I would say I had to let go. I remember when I was really sick and I was trying to with my mental health, and I felt I want to be strong, so I try to explain it with family and friends, and I would say 99.999 I was discouraged, not because they didn't want to support me, but because my expectations was skewed. The idea was I was never going to really get someone who understood me, and it wouldn't even make sense if they were close. I needed to reflect and what was the purpose, and that me being strong and sharing to them and my expectations were bringing more stress. And for me, I felt very much alone. Even though I was talking to a lot of people, I felt more alone, and the method wasn't working. That's just one of many different times that I felt in various degrees this quote fits well. Carl Jung says it this way: loneliness doesn't come from having no one around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. So again, communication, connecting, being able to connect the dots of what you really want, and being brave enough to say it or do it. Even it could take. It may seem so far away, and a lot of times when I was really struggling, if everything felt very far away. But I remember just reminding myself that later on when I got a little bit better, I realized I'm the one who's going to be living with me with this mental health issue. So no one else will understand what I'm going through besides me. So is there a way? Is there some way for me to feel more comfortable with myself? And hobbies help, being creative help, finding an outlet when I'm processing feelings, going to therapy, going through some of the trauma therapy that has been helpful for me. That all has been helpful, but it was uniquely with the context of me, because and when I grabbed onto the accountability of being effective and communicating, and not just it becomes a small habit that builds. And I can only share from my perspective. It may be helpful for you, but like I said, if things are really extreme and you're really struggling, or this year, or the year is starting bad, or you just can't, find someone you could talk to, find a community, connect. Um, Instead of agreeing to the 11th thing you promised people, maybe say no. Maybe say no, that I'm just overwhelmed. I can't do this. I learned real quick not to find how useful I am, because it can be really contrasting and cold when unintentionally people don't remember you. It's not that, they can be busy or whatever the case may be. And I used to say, and I sometimes still feel this way sometimes, I'm useful until I'm not. So the question becomes, if it's not working, when is there actually time for you? And I think when you think of self respect, we're always thinking about actual words people say to you, but a lot of times we kind of forget about the time. As a final thought, as we're right next to Valentine's Day, I encourage you to be kinder to yourself, kinder and find ways to challenge those maybe negative thoughts or thinking. If things are really disruptive and you're not able to, it's okay. Try to find, see what resources. Talk to Catholic, talk to your pastor, talk to your family, talk to your group friend, colleague, coworker, you know, classmate, teacher, your buddy, wherever, if you need help, especially as an adult. But wherever you are, I encourage you to ask it. I encourage you to be brave enough to ask it. A lot of times I've stressed in the military, and I wasn't in combat, but those who are in combat, and they're tremendously brave to save someone else's life in immediate danger. But a lot of times when we're here struggling, or we're just trying to make it to tomorrow, the bravest thing is to live. Maybe even to live a little, maybe to strive to live a little bit better. Maybe to strive to be kinder to yourself. There's just one thing I want to share as we close. It's I think it was unknown if this was I grabbed this quote. I don't remember if there was a person who said it. I thought it was interesting. I like the message it's sending, just to empower those who may be struggling. But it reads: the loneliest people are the kindest, the saddest people smile the brightest, the most damaged people are the wisest, all because they do not wish to see anyone else suffer the way they do.